Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career. Today on the podcast, we have Ari Meisel. Ari is the world's #1 leading expert on productivity, and he's helping entrepreneurs around the world do more of what they love and less of what they don't. And he's on the mission to help founders become more replaceable while empowering their teams to thrive unconditionally. Ari's story is an incredible one, from having his life changed completely 180 at 23 years old when he was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, to reworking and reshifting his life and his approach to be able to work on his business 1 hour per day. Thankfully, since then, he's been able to be declared free of all traces of the incurable disease Crohn's. And today he spends fewer than 20 minutes a day on his business, and his family, his children of 4, and his wife, Anna, get most of his time during the day. So I'm excited to have this conversation with Ari, and I hope you enjoy it. Awesome. Well, Ari, thank you so much for being on, man.
Thank you.
Ari, I was listening to one of your podcasts, and you shared in the Stop Scaling podcast kind of like a philosophy that you have on business. And it seemed like it's a philosophy both for business and life. I'd love to expand a little bit more about that, your unique viewpoint about business, life, and how you approach your work and how you arrived to that unique viewpoint.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it was sort of thrust upon me, honestly. I was diagnosed with a chronic illness, Crohn's disease, when I was 23. And I was able to overcome it, but the big shift in my life was really that I went from working these long 18-hour days, to barely being able to get an hour of work done on a given day, and decided that I needed to do things differently. And the system of productivity that I needed did not exist at the time. So I created it for myself, and it's everything that I teach, all the frameworks that I've come up with, it's all based on experimentation that I've done to solve my own problem. And not that I represent, everybody, but I mean, I've dealt with a chronic illness. I have 4 children. I have all these situations that I think are very relatable for a lot of people, and those were the constructs within which I had to operate.
And I think like the end goal, or like the purpose of one of the things that I've felt that you were saying is that just to become more human, to when you're working or growing a company, because I know like the main desire is to grow a company, sell that, or have a cash flow, lifestyle business that allows you to invest in other areas of your business, other things. Yeah, I know it's all the end goal, but that also takes us away from the day to day, from being around the people. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about what you've seen in the trenches while helping other entrepreneurs grow and build their businesses, and that kind of seen both ends of it.
I think that there are a lot of stereotypes, not the right word, but I think that's the only thing that's coming right now, that entrepreneurs feel like they have to live up to and embody. And one of those is just like, you put your head down, you work your ass off until you either make $1 billion or have a heart attack, like that. And it's unfortunate. And part of that is that it's just not taught in schools. Like entrepreneurship, they might say that they teach entrepreneurship in school, but they don't really teach entrepreneurship in school. And a lot of the things that we learn are not ultimately applicable in real life until you actually experience them, and then some people don't even get to experience them. So the point is that a lot of times entrepreneurs particularly are operating based on something they read in a book, and something that a mentor told them, and something they heard Gary Vee say, and all those things get interpreted very individually. and you're typically wrong. And then they don't think that there's another way to do it. And then they put themselves in a situation where they don't see how they could shift it. So it's not surprising that, 90% of businesses fail in the first year. Like, there's no playbook for it. Or, sorry, I take that back. They're not aware of the right playbook.
Okay, that makes sense. And we can dive a little bit into the playbook in a bit, but I do want to share that I did have an entrepreneurship experience in college going through a program. It was like a program, not even like it's like one credit, but it's just 12 students out of the whole business school. And in the beginning, you kind of have like this illusion of entrepreneurships and startups being all sexy. And then I remember getting exposed to a real business owner still in school, seeing his office, seeing how he works, and seeing how, wow, this is actually mundane. It's day to day, and it's not as sexy as you imagine it to be. But you talked a little bit about playbooks, and you talked about when you go too deep into, let's say, a path and you're working those 18, 16-hour days, and you're thinking this has to be the way because this is what everyone else is preaching. What are some of the playbooks we miss? What are some of the frameworks that we don't set up correctly?
So I think the most common one and the most damaging one is that we need more people to fix the problem. That's a really, really big one. And I can't tell you how many companies I have seen. So on the plus side of this, we see companies, and there's actually a really great book, Elaine Pofelt wrote it. It's called like The $1 Million One Person Business. And she did like some real hardcore research on this. And there was several thousand businesses that are a solopreneur basically that are doing 7 figures. And there were actually a couple of examples in the book of people that were doing 8 figures.
Wow.
But you also see businesses, and I see this all the time, where you have somebody who's doing $400,000 in revenue and they have 11 full-time employees. Right. And it just makes no sense. Right. And what happens is you get somebody who's got an idea and they start to grow it. And they get to a capacity and they're like, all right, I need more people. I need help. I need this person, I need that person. And they start hiring people and they start growing the company with people which are imperfect and don't necessarily, the person that you need at 200,000 is certainly not the person that you need at 2 million. And they skip the part where you create better systems and processes.
Interesting.
Because they don't know that that's how it's done. Right. So it's like, well, I need somebody to manage my social media. Right. So it's like, well, obviously I'm going to hire a social media manager. They don't stop to think. And that's a simple example because I'm sure now people are like, oh, well, I could, do Meet Edgar or Hootsuite or something like that. But you don't even need that. Like you can automate them so well without ever bringing on another person. And I would say that as a general rule, if you are not making $1 million in revenue, you're not ready to hire. Like you should be thinking about systems and processes that replace what you do well. Now, I'm not making that blanket statement, meaning like you can't, because obviously if you're, a really good salesperson and you need a technical person to help you do something, like then you obviously can bring them on. But you should not be focusing on hiring and building a team until you are over $1 million in revenue, because I guarantee you, I know it, I've seen it at that point, up until that point, so many of those things can and should be done with systems and processes, not just because it's cheaper, but because it forces you to actually create good systems and processes.
And that's actually the tricky part too, because anytime you say systems and processes, when I work with companies and business owners, that's almost like an afterthought or something that they have to do because they have to do it. So, and I think it also goes, we don't know what we don't know. Right. We know we've done this and it's worked for us. So we continue down this path. But how do you become more enlightened when it comes to using the right technologies, the tech stacks, the tools, the systems, the automations? Because there's so much out there now. Like thankfully we're in the era of AI where things like you're buying time at this point. But with so much out there, how do you dissect or diagnose what's the best fit for the appropriate business owner, their personality type, their growth, their industry?
Well, so here's the thing. You don't have to know all the different softwares and technologies. You don't need to know the names, the Trellos and Slacks and Airtables. Like there are people that know those things. I'm one of those people that knows those things. There are review sites that know those things. The thing that I always try to impress upon people, and I love technology, but I'm always really, really clear with people that technology is not going to solve the problem. Like you have to actually solve the problem before you bring in technology to it. you need to know that it's possible. That's what you need to understand. And that's what most people never learn, right? They never realize that, data entry is a really good example. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And data entry could be, everyone, you say data entry and everybody, I think, conjures up something different in their minds. And, everything from like, a cheap VA sort of like copy and pasting 1,000 lines in a spreadsheet to an invoice comes in and you have to enter it into a system so that it gets paid into QuickBooks,
Mm-hmm.
for example. 95% of data entry tasks, I would say at this point, can be fully automated and for free in some cases. And that free automation will never make a mistake and will never sleep and will never leave you. So, but they don't think that. They're like, oh, I need a bookkeeper, or I need a VA. I had a conversation with somebody the other day who was like, oh, I'm working 8 hours a day and I really want to get to like 1 to 2 hours a day, like you talked about. And he's like, so, I need a really great VA. Can you recommend somebody? And I responded, I was like, I can recommend an amazing VA service, but that's not going to get you from 8 hours to 2 hours. It's not going to work. In fact, you might end up working more because you're going to have to be training and explaining processes that make no sense.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And that's something that I've seen as well, very tool agnostic, looking at what does the actual process look like? What is the end outcome? Who's involved or what's involved? And that line of thinking does take some time. But once you do that, the outcome becomes obvious and just seeking the solution. But I think it also takes, there's a certain, I would say mindset. I'm not sure if mindset's the right word, but a certain state of beliefs in order to say, hey, I actually can do this. I should be focusing on this path. Because you've come across it, I'm sure, micromanagers, CEOs who want to be really involved and know every little thing. And they think that meeting every single day with the team is going to solve a problem. So what are some of the beliefs that founders have to go through in order to understand and actually work towards building established systems and processes?
Well, so a big one, and you just referred to it really well, actually, or you alluded to it, is the difference between management and leadership, right? And so micromanagement is a horrible thing to happen in a company because you're telling the people that work for you that you don't trust them. And what we really need to be doing is empowering people, which is what leadership is really about. It's about setting that direction and then empowering people to get there and hopefully overcome obstacles that they may or may not encounter on their own. Because they feel that ownership, they feel that responsibility and the pride that comes along with getting that kind of work done. Whereas if you're looking over their shoulder every 5 minutes to make sure it's getting done right, they're going to wonder really quickly, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what's going on here? And this doesn't feel good. So that idea that like they need to know everything that's going on, again, all that means is that they're not trusting it. And what they're ultimately doing is creating a very, very small limit on what the company can do because they are the limit at that point. Bottlenecks are at the top of the bottles, right? Like that's how it works. And the best thing that most leaders can do once they have good people on top of good systems and processes is get out of the way.
Getting out of the way. Okay. Sorry. I love how you established that, but it's still kind of something that, what are some of the things that you have to believe in order to know that I have to get out of the way? Is it, because sometimes I feel like it's training a child and they have to fall a little bit for them to understand not to run too fast, right? But sometimes you don't want to let them fall. So.
Right. So the biggest paradigm shift, I think I would say for entrepreneurs and founders is to realize that you are not that unique. Because it's a trap that we all fall into, and it's an ego fueled trap, which is that nobody can do it the way I can do it. This is my idea, it's my baby, it's my thing, and nobody's ever going to match what I do. And I'm sorry to say that you're just not that unique. You might have been really unique when you started the business, but now you're not. And if you cannot become more replaceable, then you are the limit to your company's success.
Wow. That's definitely a hard pill to swallow, but I think it's a necessary one as you continue to grow. Another thing that I know that you've mentioned and something that I've been fascinated with is mastering communications, especially when it comes to, obviously, like you mentioned, business has to be over $1 million for you to have a nice team to be able to grow and have communications. But even before then, right, you still have vendors, you still have teams, you still might have like a leadership board and just whatever it is. But how can companies implement communication solutions so that they can limit the meetings that they have and increase productivity and also kind of quote unquote freedom of less micromanagement?
Yeah, so communication is the biggest thing that I attack when I work with companies and entrepreneurs. Because first of all, everything beyond that, project management processes, it all gets a lot easier to deal with once we do have a good communication structure in place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's three sort of main elements of that. The first one is decision making, which is a really important part of communication. The third one is the proper way of delegating. And the second one, I'm going that order on purpose. The second one, and it's actually probably the most important, is responsibility, meaning your ability to respond how and where makes the most sense for everybody. And asynchronous communication is by far the single biggest lever there is in terms of being a more productive company and as individuals. Meetings should be like a last resort by far. And there's so many different reasons to go into this, but one of the big things, and pushing for a meeting to me at this point basically suggests it's just a complete lack of human psychology and understanding. Because the odds, I had somebody ask me this the other day, actually, they were saying, well, with a synchronous meeting, you have prepared for it. Everybody's prepared for it. They're in the right headspace to tackle that issue. And I was like, what cartoon world do you live in that's the case? When I go to a meeting, there's two people checking their phones, and one person is doing most of the talking, and somebody else might be adding a thing here or two, but they're really just waiting until the meeting's over. And the other one, and then the last person in the meeting is really concerned with the project that they're not working on right now because they're sitting in this freaking meeting. So the idea of like, oh yeah, everyone's in the same headspace where you go, it's crazy. It's really crazy. And two people is hard enough to get on the same schedule, much less 4 or 5 or more.
Oh, a bigger team,
So asynchronous communication allows you to communicate at your best, plain and simple. You communicate when you want, the other person receives it when they want, and they respond when they want, which might not be at the same time. That goes on, and you invariably end up with more effective communication. But it's a culture issue, right? People are so used to having the meeting, they're so used to the face-to-face. I mean, I can tell you, like in my life right now, this conversation that we are having, podcasting and like in general, that's the only synchronous meetings I ever have.
Until we get to the ability of asynchronous. But that's a few things. One, I really appreciate your stance on that because, like you mentioned, there is a culture shift or retraining, I want to say, to individuals who are used to years of just having meetings. And thinking long about this, I think the best purpose of a synchronous meeting within a team is just for team bonding because you can share human interactions. Other than that, I don't see any other productive lift from that except just connecting with an individual
But then don't
in real time.
Go axe throwing or something.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. But that's the only synchronous, not like a meeting in place of work, but like that's the only time to meet together, right? Like I'm just talking about those scenarios. But it's also like I used to take pride, like, oh yeah, my calendar's filled 10, 12 Zoom appointments a day, and that was like, yeah, that don't ask me why or how, but then now seeing the other shift and seeing like, well, I need to start retraining those around me, even outside the peers. It's like, hey, let's actually try this instead, and it's better for you. But still, others insist like, no, here's my calendar, schedule a time that works best for you, and it's a retraining shift.
Well, and put it so for the opposite of that, right? The opposite extreme of that, I do private coaching right now, and I've gone back to private one-on-one coaching, and every coaching business guru would tell you that you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to stop doing the one-on-one coaching. You're supposed to have mastermind and group coaching, all that kind of stuff, and scale it. But I figured out a way to scale one-on-one coaching, which is by doing it asynchronously, right? So I use a voice communication app called Voxer, which I know you're familiar with. And that's how all of the conversation happens. So I am currently working with 14 clients that are paying me the same rate that I've always gotten. We're having really deep conversations. We're having very effective conversations, and I don't have a single call on my calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And in retrospect, it's like, I mean, I knew this going into it, but in retrospect, it's kind of like, I can't imagine, let's schedule a call for 6 days from now for 45 minutes so I can give you the 3-minute answer that you need.
And wait 6 days and whatever time frame something comes up.
And block out 45 minutes for it when I can just tell you right now.
Mm-hmm. It's a huge mindset shift. And it's something that I think can definitely change any business. I would arguably say, regardless of its size, unless it's like a very small, tiny business, but I would say any business with traction and continually serve customers and clients, being able to move to this level of communication style, I think will transform not only the mindset of the leaders, but also making sure that the team has more fun doing the actual work, as opposed to focusing on 2 to 3 hours a day, just trying to communicate something to the other person, and 2 to 3 actions happen from that.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, that's the issue, right? Is as a leader, as a project manager, as an employee, right? Do you want it to be good or do you want it to be yours? Right? Meaning, like, do we want to get the work done, or do we want everyone to know how great we are, or who has the big ideas or something, or do we want to just show it? It's actions versus words, ultimately.
When you hire people, is there a certain type of personality that you like to bring onto the team, depending that they adapt to this level of thinking?
Well, I mean, it's my way or nothing for asynchronous. Like, I'm not working any other way. And in fact, my last hire, who's a woman who's currently working with me, I promised her when she came on that we would never have a synchronous meeting or conversation.
Oh, wow.
I've held true to that. So, and she's a mother and stay-at-home mom, and she's homeschooling, and she does amazing work. And she probably does, I don't even know, but she probably does 20 hours a week for me. And I don't know when she does it, but she does it, and she gets it all done, and it's great, and I can count on her. So that's going in. That's a rule. But there's 2 qualities in general that I really like to look for, and that is attention to detail and proactivity. All right, so sort of being able to take that extra step and move further. And I have to say, after hiring literally hundreds of people over the years in various different positions in various different industries, I could pretty much tell you that sight unseen, I would hire a woman with military experience over anybody else.
Wow.
Just something I've noticed.
Something you've picked up. No, I love that. Well, Ari, I really appreciated our conversation here together. For our listeners out there, what's the best place for people to go to reach out to you or learn more about what you're up to?
It's all lessdoing.com. I got a brand new website actually, and I'm on social media as at Ari Meisel, but everything is at lessdoing.com.
Perfect. And I'll put that in the show notes. Ari, thank you again, man.
Thanks, Raul.